We do hard things when we're young. When you're 50,
100%.
when you're 60, you're still the same person. We got to stop blocking ourselves that we can't do the hard things.
We've been brainwashed in this idea of comfort.
Yeah.
Constantly seeking comfort. All right, I can tell you where total comfort leads to. It leads to total decay. So you want to be comfortable, you get the lazy boy chair, you got your Netflix, you got your box of donuts. Okay, comfort, great. You do that for 6 months and you're dead.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Welcome back to Stronger by Design. I'm Michelle MacDonald, and today I'm here with guest David Stewart, and he's here from Ageist. Go on and check them out, ageist.com. They also have a podcast. Joan and I actually have been on that podcast a couple of times, and sign up for their newsletter. He also has a new platform called Super Age. I am also going to be on the advisory board for that. A lot of great minds, great thinkers in the longevity space. And please sign up for their newsletter. It's a mindset newsletter you get hit regularly with great information on how you can optimize the aging cycle. So, David, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
You're the superstar.
No. You are. I can't wait to dive into your story.
It's great to be here, and all that you do with Wonder Woman and with and your mom, you guys are really setting the bar for what's possible. And I think that a lot of people think that what you guys do is impossible. And what we say in all the platforms that I'm on, our greatest obstacle is our poverty imagination of what is possible. And if we expand that imagination, we can do tremendous things. And that's what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you said. Like, our attitude towards later life needs a complete reboot, right?
Yeah.
On every level, in that we've really locked ourselves into this culture that's totally anti-age.
Well, it's anti-living, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're 2 years old, you're aging. Hello. You're alive. To be alive is to age. Until we get to the Benjamin Button, genetic reboot or something, that's the way it is. So, let's be positive about living and positive about, aging is just, it's also, there's so many items on the menu, right? So I'm 66. So me at 66 at this time is maybe 30 years ago what a 40-year-old would have been like. So, these goalposts have shifted quite significantly.
Yeah, not for everyone. And this is important. Like, I want to dive into your whole story, how this became your passion, right? And did it start, because you had a really fast-paced lifestyle, and then you had a health crisis. Did your
a little bit.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that and how that changed your perspective on health and longevity and your priorities, because that's important.
Yeah. Well, I want to say, William James talks about these sort of different forms of enlightenment. Sometimes people just have these white light experiences. I'm sort of the long educational variety. So it took me a little while. I had this very rocking career as a photographer. I was living in Paris, working in New York, Los Angeles, Tokyo, traveling constantly. And what happened was, I think I was in my 49th year, I spent a year in a hospital with a weirdo autoimmune disease, principally found in young females, like girls under 10. So I had this wacko thing called idiopathic thrombophobia. And what it is your body flags your platelets as some foreign entity to be removed. Not a good thing.
Wow.
So that led to a couple of like Stephen King sort of crazy, scary incidences, and a lot of, medical science is amazing if you do things like break your arm. They're just great at that. But once you get into sort of autoimmune stuff, so cancer is one side of autoimmune, like what I had is the other side. It's all very experimental, and that really set me back. And it ended up with organ removal, not something I really signed up for. So they took my spleen out. Yeah, like right away they said, this is what we want to do. And I was like, whoa,
Wow.
I think I'm going to need that thing. You can't have that. But after a year of just like the sort of the risks of all the treatments they were doing to me was exceeding the risks of the spleen removal. So it was like, okay, take it out. And once they did, everything reset. And so that was like 16, 17 years ago, and I'm fine. But what it did was, it was like, we need to ratchet everything down here. So, enough of this crazy travel lifestyle. And it took me, like, once I got out of the hospital, it was like a couple of years to sort of get back, and then to actually get back involved with, my physicality, getting back to the gym, getting back to sports. That took a little while. And, once I started Ageist, that really accelerated everything, because we realized, because we wanted to understand, Michelle, like, what was different about us versus people who were older. And I'm going to carve out for your mom, who's like sort of an N of one over here. But
she's the anomaly.
So versus like my parents or my wife's family from North Georgia. And it's like, it was a completely different thing. So we wanted to understand what this was. And what we found was people's behavior, their sort of future-leaning behavior, was based upon how they felt about their physicality, how they felt about their physicality in the future, which was based on how they felt about their physicality now. So that's what really turbocharged me into this world of health, wellness, health span, longevity, all this sort of stuff. I started, from my podcast, I talked to a lot of these people, and I realized that like everything, I tell people like, what does your head sit on? It's your body. You gotta hit the body dialed in. You don't have that, you don't really have anything.
So you were in the hospital. You were 49. So I guess you got out when you were 50 or so, and that's a really, that's a time of our life where, age can really set in fast if you're not doing all the things, right? And if you're hospitalized, you're probably not doing all the things. We've all heard about hospital food. I don't know if they had a gym there. Probably not, unless it was a really fancy private gym.
Michelle, I need to level set here, like with the drugs I was on.
Yeah.
And that it was like walking across the room was like,
tough.
Wow, that's great. I need to rest.
Yeah. So if anything, you had an accelerated aging experience at
I guess
50,
that's right.
Right? And then of course there's all the cultural, I don't know about you, but when I turned 50, I was like, I had all these preconceived ideas of what the 50s would be like. And of course, the closer I got to the 50s, I thought, well, maybe they're not going to be true. But when you have a crisis like that, and you rapidly accelerate the aging process, which would be like sarcopenia, like you must have lost muscle, right? And, your metabolic rate slows down. And when you're ill and injured, we all know there's a depressive aspect to that too, right? So your thoughts of like optimism in the future and long-term plans can take a hit. I don't know, but I'm just speculating. So here you are in your 50s, you know that your lifestyle, you can't go back to what it was, right? And your health has changed. What was that process like, and how did you shift to before Ageist, right? Like what happened there? Because I'm sure that's one of the reasons why I would think you ended up going for Ageist, creating.
Well, yeah, it was part of it. I think, as I said, it was educational, and you start to learn a little bit more every day about what to eat, about how to exercise. These things are, at least for me, it was really, I needed to learn a lot. And it took a long time, and it's like ongoing. Like I still, like every day I learn more stuff. And it's, what we're learning here is what are the best practices for most people? And then what works for you? Like what does work for the individual? So, there's all sorts of people out there that'll tell you like, you need to eat like, sometimes people will say like, you need to stop eating. Like Brian Johnson, you just stop eating 12 hours before you go to bed. Like, Brian, no, like that just does not work for me. Like I need to have some kind of protein in my stomach, or I'm going to wake up like my cortisol spiked and I can't go to sleep. So it's this sort of endless amount of ferreting out the information, curating that information, being an explorer for yourself, essentially, like going out there, explore, test and learn. And just because you heard somebody, like me on a podcast or somebody else say, you need to, do X during the full moon. Okay, whatever, try it. If that works for you, that's great. But if it doesn't, let it go, try something else.
So was this before Ageist? You're getting yourself better, you're exploring, you're reading, you're going down that rabbit hole of reading about this stuff. And when did they realize that, and when I go on to Ageist, I mean, there's so much great information there. It's incredible. But it also seems to have very much a raison d'être, right? Like it seems to be, you're the space that companies can come to get their act together when it comes to marketing the Gen X people, right? Like we were invisible, and now all of a sudden it's like we're hot, right? Okay, these guys are hot. How do we market to them? We can't be selling them these like young models and whatnot, and 50s are no longer gray-haired canes, like 50-year-olds or 60-year-olds. We're like, we're doing stuff still. We're thriving.
Well, yeah, I mean that's what we do. Is people often come to me. There's like, oh, ageist, you must be against something, and I'm not really. I mean, I think one of the things we learned from the 60s is the harder you push against something, the harder that thing pushes back. So we don't do that. I mean, very, very rarely will we actually talk about ageism or that stuff. What we do is we just put on the menu. We say, okay, here's this person. This is their age. This is what they're doing. This is how they did it. If you want that, okay, it's on the menu. This is what, here's some interesting food for you. Here's what we're learning about strength training. Here's what we're learning about VO2 max. You can do this if you want to. And, people say to me, they're like, oh, wow, that's hard. And I said, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't say it was easy, but don't tell me it's impossible. And I think this is something that you and I really align on. This idea of hard is not impossible. They're different. So, changing your life, even if you're coming from some level of low activity or you're sort of scared about going into the gym, this is hard. It's new, but it's not impossible. Like, I'm not as strong as you and your mom, but, I do okay I do much better than most of the very young people in the gym. So, you can do this. Like, you can build strength, you can build muscle, you can build agility, you can build VO2 max. You can learn Mandarin if you want to, whatever. But I'm not saying it's easy, but it's this consistency of just staying with it every day. You get a little better. And then what happens, Michelle, is we teach ourselves. So it's one thing for me or you to tell somebody you can do this. It's a whole other thing when that person does it and they say to themselves, they have evidence to themselves, I did that. That's amazing. What else do I think I can't do that I can do?
Yeah. Yeah, you're such a champion that aging is an opportunity, right? And shifting that dialogue that it's not over. It's like, no, it's another phase, and we got to rethink and reboot our attitude. And I also like how you mentioned earlier that, we do hard things when we're young. When you're 50, 100%. When you're 60, you're still the same person. We got to stop blocking ourselves that we can't do the hard things.
We've been brainwashed in this idea of comfort.
Yeah.
Constantly seeking comfort. All right. I can tell you where total comfort leads to. It leads to total decay. So you want to be comfortable, you get the lazy boy chair, you got your Netflix, you got your box of donuts. Okay. Comfort. Great. You do that for 6 months and you're dead. Okay.
Yeah. Choose your hard, right? We always go back. Choose your hard, right?
Choose your hard, right? Yeah. And it's what you said. We forget this. We were 18, 20, 22 years old. Everything was hard. Right? And now we're like, oh, I need to take my comfort. Well, okay, but we need to continually challenge ourselves. As human beings, we are built to do hard things. And it doesn't mean we want to overdo, right? Because, especially in terms of like physical training, what I do is I look for what is the minimum stimulus that's going to cause the adaptation. Which doesn't mean destroy David so he can't move. No, we just want to do that. And I think that's with most things. So pick that hard and you can do it.
Yeah. And then there's also this idea of being purpose driven. And again, like when we're younger, we can think, I've got to find my purpose. I've got to have, value driven work and all that. But then when we're older, we're thinking retirement. But instead, if we, again, choose to view age as an opportunity, the luxury, right, of of being able to be in a culture where we can age and we can age really well, if we see that as an opportunity to even look again at our perspective on our lives and make maybe different choices. Like, okay, now where do I want to go with my life? Maybe it's changing your career or contributing back to society significantly. It can start in your 50s, in your 60s. It can start in your 70s.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when you say aging is a privilege, well, you're not dead.
Very blunt. I love it.
You're not dead. And I think about like the people that I went to high school with, 15% of them are probably not alive, and 20 or 30% of them couldn't do anywhere near, they're just not mobile, right? They just can't do these things. So we show up not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. And I think oftentimes, I hear this from women that as they get older, they say, well, I'm invisible. You're not invisible. As human beings, we are wired to see other people. And I feel like, at least for myself, like I have a personal responsibility to really become the best version of myself so other people can see that and say that's possible. And I think it's important to remember, bring who you are today to the table. That's who we're talking about. The best version of yourself today, which is not like my 20-year-old self. I could run. I can't run like that anymore. It just isn't going to happen. But that's okay. I'm bringing who I am today. I have to adapt somewhat because of where I'm at. I got some parts of me that don't work so well anymore, but that's okay. We work with that and we bring that best versions of ourselves, to what we can do today.
What about this idea of reinvention as we get older, right? The Madonna experience.
Yeah.
I think it's powerful because it's something that we proselytize a lot at the Wonder Woman. We don't just do physical transformations, but we want to help you radically shift that whole inner narrative so you can choose exactly how you want to write the next chapter.
So we've done a little bit of research on this, and so what we found was that there's sort of, and everyone's different on this, and I sort of hate to generalize.
But you're going to do it anyways.
I'm going to do it anyway because it's easier.
Yeah.
So
we get it.
There are these sort of periods of time, right? And sort of, in your 20s or so, you're trying to like figure out who you are, put yourself out of the world. Where do I fit in? And then your 30s, maybe your early 40s, maybe you got kids, maybe you got a mortgage, maybe you got a business, and it's sort of head down on those railroad tracks going forward. And there's oftentimes this sort of parental thing back there, like aligning with parental values or in opposition to. So you're either sort of reactive to that stuff or you're just like head down, not really paying attention to stuff. But what starts to happen is people start to get this vision, and it's sort of like, it's like a mountain in the night. Like you get a feeling, you can't see it, but there's something out there. And so we often see people, late 40s, early 50s, they start making these moves. They don't know why. They haven't quite connected the dots yet. But by the time they're like maybe mid 50s or so, they start looking back and they're like, oh, 7 years ago, I did that thing. I wonder why I did that. It's because you're beginning to manifest this thing that you thought was better for you. And not everybody changes track. Some people are like, I love what I do. I'm going to double down on this thing. This is the most amazing thing ever. Or, I think I want a parallel track here. I need to set up some kind of an off-ramp to get over here to do this. But they start doing it unconsciously before they start moving into it consciously.
Tell me more about that. I'm fascinated. My little mind is whirling on some of the decisions I've been making recently. I honestly, I think more of like, I got to get this thing done. I got to do it. I got to focus. That's what I think.
Well, yeah. So I think I'll give you an example. One of the very first people we profiled at Ageist, so this was about 10 years ago, was this woman, Sophia. And Sophia at that point, I think she was 58, 59. And in her early 50s, she was the head of the architecture school at Yale. Now, this is not a job that you leave, right? This is like awesome. But she starts doing stuff. She buys some property in Spain. And then she starts hanging out there. Then she builds a house. And then she starts studying Spanish. Now, none of this is sort of making sense until at 56, she left Yale. She left the head of the architecture school and she became an architect in Spain. And when I was speaking to her, she was like, in fact, I think she started studying Spanish in her late 40s. She wasn't quite sure why. She's like, I'm going to study some Spanish. So these things start lining up. And then suddenly she's, at sort of the far end of this journey. And she's like, she can look back and say, oh, I did that. I interviewed another gentleman, Joe was his name. And Joe was a little older and he was an attorney. And he realized in his mid-50s that he just loved being an attorney. So he was an attorney in the hospitality business and he just loved the whole scene. Like he got to hang out in restaurants and hotels and he got to talk to these people and do this stuff. And he just thought this was like playpen for him. He just thought it was great. But he came to that, he sort of came to that realization. Now, I'm not saying this happens to everyone. I think that you need a certain amount of self-awareness. You can't really be in a crisis when this is going on. Like you need to be able to sort of sense who you are, how do you fit in with things, to be in that non-reactive state. Because if you're reactive, you're just, you're going to be moving in opposition to something rather than in alignment with where you are, which is a different thing.
Yeah, I love that. And so this is in alignment with the idea of reinventing yourself or continuing to double down.
It can be total reinvention. Like I've seen this like hundreds of times. I've also seen flavors of this. So it can be somebody going from corporate job to something completely different. Or it can be just sort of just a step slightly to the side. So they're taking the skills, sort of who they are in this one position, and maybe it wasn't quite right, and they just move it a little bit to the right. And they're like, oh, that's a good fit. Oh yeah, that's better for me. So I don't think you have to do radical transformation. You can, I've seen it, all the way to I'm perfect just the way I am. I love this thing that I'm doing. So spectrum.
Yeah, I think for me, as somebody who coaches women, the real radical transformation comes with gaining of self-awareness or deep diving into it and really owning, radically owning, the why of, the why you're doing certain things, shifting things if you want to, but really truly owning your perspective. And it's so empowering.
Scary.
And it changes everything. You could be doing the same thing, but because your perspective and attitude have changed, it's different. It feels different, looks different, tastes different, smell, and it feels different. And it oftentimes has different outcomes too, right? So
I think it's scary to declare out to the world, this is who I am. For real, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, this is where I'm going, is a very scary thing to do. But
I think this idea just popped into my head. I follow a couple of gals on Instagram that have these great, like they're Gen Xers, and they have these really great accounts, and they bring us down memory lane, how we grew up and the experiences that we had. But I do feel that with the information era, the digital age that we're in, being Gen Xers, right, which is a very interesting, all Gen Xers, I think, we think that we're the coolest generation. We've really straddled some of the maybe the hardships or the rawness of how socialization and parenting used to be. We've been through this huge digital transformation where we didn't start with this stuff. Like my first TV, I think, was like a black and white TV with the big antennas and the knobs. And now, we know where we are now. And yet we are also immersed as we're going through this seminal period of time, like through our 50s and 60s, where we're inundated with podcasts, information, self-awareness, self-help, but coming again with that Gen X backbone. So it's really interesting to be part of this generation and at this age, the 50s and 60s. There's so much, I agree with you wholeheartedly, there's so much opportunity to reinvent everything, not just ourselves and our own narrative, but cultural narratives, especially around aging.
Do you ever watch Mad Men?
No.
So television series a few years ago, and it was about advertising. And the Don Draper character, at one point, somebody asked him, something about like his identity. He's working in this thing, and he's like, he looks at them straight face and he says, "This is America. You just make up who you want to be." I love that.
I love that. It's true, especially these days, right?
It's true, really.
For somebody, I want to end this first episode with a simple strategy, your top recommendation, because I mean, you really rock this space. It's incredible to see what you're doing. The platforms you've created are incredibly successful, and you really make it cool to be in your 50s and in your 60s. I love it. And you certainly don't shirk away from the messaging that, like, yes, it's hard work, but it's worth it. And you've done it, and you've interviewed so many people that are living examples of that. What's an advice for somebody who, like, they're interested, they're intrigued by the messaging, but they're feeling stuck? How do they get started? How do they change things?
Move.
Move, yeah.
Like, some people can think themselves into right acting. I'm not one of them. I need to act myself into right thinking. I need to educate myself. So I need to take a step. I need to do something. I need to do something physical. And that might be just like open the door. It might be if I'm feeling lonely, I get in an elevator, and I do this all the time. I say, "Love your shoes. Tell me about the shoes. Those are great." Whatever they are. People
that's from your photography world.
Right. Well, everybody wants to be seen. They want to be heard. They want a discussion. And I live in a building where there's a lot of English as a second language people from China who are very shy about speaking. And when I acknowledge them and I say, "Oh, I love that. That's great." "Oh, my God," they light up. They're like, "Oh, you saw me. Oh, you're talking to me. Oh, this is great." So little things like that, these actions. And not a fan of Sheryl Sandberg, but like lean in. You've got to like go forward, lean in. The scary thing is probably where you want to go. If the gym is scary, you need to learn about the gym. If talking to other people is scary, nice shoes. Like whatever it is, you act. Thinking is only going to get you. You can really get tied up in your head. A lot of navel gazing there. Action.
So act, move, take care of your physicality, defy social norms, like continue to meet people, continue to be engaged, do the hard things. I love it. Yeah. So let's wrap up the first episode here. And guys, in between these two episodes, again, I'm going to send you over to ageist.com, sign up for their newsletter. They've got a ton. There's a podcast there as well. So newsletter, podcast, a ton of interviews, a lot of great people that they spotlight. And you can go ahead and follow these people, whether it's on their websites or on their social media platforms. And it's this incredible world that David has curated for us. And he's got a ton of great speeches he's done collected there for you too. It's really great. It's really interesting stuff that will galvanize you that indeed there's this whole world waiting for you. If you're in that 50s, 60s and above space, that is cool to be older. There's a lot of exciting things happening, and all we need to do is jump. Head over there, and also to Super Age as well. Get on their mindset newsletter, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. David, thank you so much for joining, and guys, take care. We'll see you in the next episode.